name's Joe Slattery. I'm one of the staff in the genealogy department here at Broadmoor. And for this month, we're getting into the Black History Month, really January and February, both of those. And so I'm specialized in Civil War history, Civil War records. And I've already done some classes in the past on some of the Civil War veterans, especially the Confederate. But there were a number of Union veterans who lived here. They were, and I haven't done the Union, the white Union at this time, but I'm going to cover today some of the Black Civil War veterans who lived here in Shreveport. And I'm concentrating on about, don't have an exact number on them, but I'm going to concentrate on about 25 to 30 of them and tell a little bit about some of those. This is a recruiting poster from Philadelphia. They're recruiting black troops, especially when they got into the war. I don't know what year this recruiting poster was, but they did start recruiting down in the South for black troops in some of the occupied areas of the South. So here are the numbers for the Black Civil War troops. So the total number is 178,895. And you can see those 4 states that I put out there: Louisiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Mississippi. Those were the 4th largest states for having black troops. Now there is, I mentioned down at the bottom, this is in the Army, the infantry, cavalry, and artillery. But down there, about the 19,000, there are also 19,000 blacks in the U.S. Navy. So you can see those 4 states, Louisiana, Mississippi, Kentucky, and Tennessee. If you add those up, it comes to about half of all the black troops that the Union had. And during the war, there were 40,000 deaths for the black soldiers and sailors. And that comes out to a death rate of 20%, which is a little bit higher than the white troops. And this is the book that I got some information from this. Most of it I checked records, but this book came out in 2011, and it's a pretty thick book. You can find it, it's digitalized on the internet, but it has a lot of good information about the U.S. colored troops. And now I'm going to show you it's hard to see those different regiments, but I have all the numbers of the Louisiana black troops. There were 31 of them, 31 different regiments. Most of them were infantry regiments. If you see if you see this USCI, that abbreviation, you'll see it through my presentation. That stands for United States Colored Infantry, and that's what they call it. Sometimes you see USCT, which is United States Colored Troops, but then there's different abbreviations when it's just infantry or cavalry. So you can see there's 28 different regiments of infantry, and there's a little bit down here. There was only one black cavalry unit from Louisiana, and then there were 2 artillery regiments who were recruited out of Louisiana. And if you take the number of regiments that they had, and how many troops, how many enlistments there were in Louisiana, which was 24,502. Each regiment averaged out to around 800 men. You had two kind of special groups at the beginning, Corps d'Afrique and Native Guards. These were part of the 19th Corps of the Union Army. And the Corps d'Afrique consisted of, it mentions those different numbers. There were about six different regiments that made up that corps. So that was a corps that was strictly black regiments. And out of the veterans that I'll get to, there's 5 of them that were in this group. They were part of those regiments, those 6 regiments. Then you had the Native Guards, which it was a smaller group, but there were at least 3 regiments. And there were some Shreveport veterans from that group too. And here's some of the battles. Most of these were in 64, 65, later in the war. But those are the battles and skirmishes that some black soldiers, the ones who were veterans here in Shreveport, which ones they took part in. The Port Hudson siege was right about the same time as you had the siege of Vicksburg. Port Hudson is to the north of Baton Rouge. And then and that skirmish that took place in Vicksburg, July 4th, 1864, was about 1 year after the surrender of Vicksburg in 1863. Then you had Fort Blakely, which was also a fairly big battle, and it included some of the units that where you have veterans here at Shreveport that were part of those units. And then some more, a couple of more in Mississippi and in South Carolina, some of those battles. And some of the information that I used, one of the primary pieces of information was the 1890 Veterans Schedule. What happened in 1890, they took both a population schedule, which was your regular census, then they had a special census, which was the Veterans Schedule. Unfortunately, not all of that survived. The 1890 general population schedule, there was a fire, and about 95%, close to 95% of that was destroyed. Also, some of the Veterans Schedule was, a lot of it was destroyed too. All that survived were they had the states from Alabama to Kansas. All of that is gone. But luckily, from Kentucky to Wyoming, those states alphabetically, those are ones where the veteran schedule survived, which is good for Louisiana and Mississippi, Texas. Now, when they went out to canvass these veterans, they were only supposed to do Union soldiers. They weren't. Confederate soldiers were not to be put on the 1890 veterans schedule. If they found a Confederate on there, they scratched it out. So in Caddo Parish, they have, altogether there were, on that schedule, there's 86 soldiers, and both white and black. The number of the black Union veterans on that schedule is 28, so about 1/3 of the ones on that 1890 schedule are black. And here's this page. You might not be able to read it too well, but that's a page from the veteran schedule. The official title of it was A Special Schedule Surviving Soldiers, Sailors, and Marines and Widows. And for Caddo, there's not a lot of pages. There's 8 pages you can get about 14 names on each page, and sometimes there were some blanks, but all the ones on those 8 pages came out to 86. And right here they show the name of the soldier. The unit would be in here, and it would have when they a date of enlistment over here. It would, and then down here they'd have some remarks, and I'll get to some of the remarks dealt with their physical condition. Also during this time period, around 1890, a little bit after, they had some veterans groups, Union veterans groups that formed. The GAR, which stands for Grand Army of the Republic, that was the name for the organization of Union veterans of the Civil War. So they had these GAR posts all around the country. Of course, mostly up north, but there were some of them in the south too. And they formed, the black veterans here formed a post around 1892. And this was, they called it the James A. Garfield Post. And the reason they did that is not to, in the 1880s, Garfield, that's when he had become president and he was assassinated. So they named the post after him. And the only thing we know about this post, and what the post number 19, but the records are lost. Nobody knows how many members there were of this post, and don't know their names. So what I did this a few years ago, is went through using the 1890 Veterans Schedule and some other records, and I found that there were around 30 people, black veterans, who could have belonged to this post. It doesn't mean they did, but their likelihood, at least a majority of them, I think, were members of this post. And there wasn't much in the news. In fact, this post was not even mentioned in the newspaper. There wasn't a black newspaper until around 1920. But there wasn't anything in the newspaper about this GAR post that was here. So I did find in the newspaper in 1884, about 10 years before, they started a Colored Veterans Benevolent Association. And again, that's the only article I found. There's no other information about it, so I don't know how long it stayed around. Didn't give any information out. It did say they filed their charter in the clerk's office. But if they did, I didn't find it. I looked through a lot of things in the clerk's office and didn't find it, which would have given me some information about that group. But over here, these are the ones who, most of them were from the 1890 Veterans Schedule. There's a few others, but these are the ones who I think could have been members of the James Garfield Post. And I know you might not be able to see it, but I'm going to go through a lot of it fairly. Not going to spend too much time on each one, except for a few special ones. This first one is this is the only, out of these veterans, this is the only one I have a photo of. None of the others have a photo. Also, he has a grave marker. A lot of these don't even have grave markers. Some of them we don't even know where they're buried. So, Cesar Carpentier Antoine was born in New Orleans. He was a free mulatto, and he was at the beginning of the war. He was a member of the 7th Louisiana Infantry. He was a captain, which when I saw that, it was because the story is that among the black troops, there couldn't be any black officers, no black officers at all among any of the black units. Well, he was a captain, and his brother, whose name was Felix Antoine, was a lieutenant. So he served as an officer during several years of the war, and then what happened is they changed generals in charge of Louisiana. It went from General Benjamin Butler to General Nathaniel Banks. General Banks was a political officer. He didn't like the idea of having black officers, and he said they all had to resign their commission. It was going to go back. In Louisiana, there wouldn't be any black officers. So what Cesar Antoine did, he decided most of them, these other officers, they left the service and they weren't going to even be part of the Union Army. But Cesar, he decided to join the 10th Heavy Artillery, the 10th Colored Heavy Artillery. And he did have a pension. I'm mentioning on a lot of these, I'm putting in if they have a pension, which the pensions give a lot of information. Most of these black veterans, about 21 of them have pensions. And the pensions give you a lot of great information. Here's a pension right here for someone I'll tell you later on, I'll cover him. This is a pension you get. Now, you spend a lot, this is really two pensions. It's a veteran's pension, and then he died and his widow had to file for another pension. But this is two pensions. This is a couple of hundred pages. Each pension you get from the National Archives, it costs $80. So I didn't buy this one. Luckily it was donated to us. So it's at least $160 worth. And so there's still about 15 pensions out there for these black veterans that we'd like to get, but it may take a while. It's too bad. If the National Archives branch was closer to here, we could go and get them for a lot cheaper than $80. They come from Sweetland, Maryland, where you have to order them from.
Talk about Isabel.
Oh, yeah, the person who at first we only had a few pensions. I bought a pension a copy of a pension for a soldier I'll cover, and Reed Matthews, he also has purchased a pension. But Isabel Woods, she's a member of the Architects Genealogical Association, she said, give me a list of some of those and I'll order some. And she's in the process. She's already given us this one and about 4 others. And so she's been spending some good money. You can find out all kinds of things from these pensions. It tells what the veteran, what he was doing before he enlisted, if he was a slave, which a lot of them were. It tells where they were a slave, who was the slave owner. It tells anything about they have a lot of medical records in here. If they're saying that they had some injuries or something that was caused during their service, they have the medical reports, all kind of affidavits. It's some good. Some of it is a little dry, but it's and most all of them for these black veterans though are 100 pages or more. So Isabel Woods is still working on getting some others. It takes a while, but they're like I say, if you go in and it doesn't cost as much to get these copies of these pensions. So he has, in fact, Cesar Antoine has one, and that's one of the ones that's kind of on the top of the list because he was his occupation was he was an editor and publisher of a couple of newspapers in New Orleans. I think one was called the Black Republican. He was also a cotton factor, and then he was Louisiana state senator. He was the lieutenant governor here in Louisiana from 1872 to 1880. And you can see his grave marker there. That's a fairly new grave marker. It wasn't put in until the administration of Cedric Glover. Cedric Glover there, you had, there's another photo I didn't put in here. It shows all these historians and city officials, and shows Cedric Glover having after they put in this marker. It's in the cemetery where Cesar is buried is Bethlehem Missionary Baptist Church Cemetery, which is near the corner of West 70th and Burt Coons. Also, I mentioned Cesar Antoine's brother, Felix Antoine. Well, it turns out I was checking around. My great-grandfather was an attorney, and Felix lived down in New Orleans like Cesar did before he moved up here. And Felix gave a power of attorney to my great-grandfather to help him sell a piece of property that he had up here. So, and then later I found out that Cesar had some correspondence with my great-grandfather too. And here's a couple of other pieces of other records that are dealing with Cesar. This is a service record over here on the. Now, service records for all the colored troops, the black troops, they've all been digitalized. You don't have to go through the National Archives. They're on a site called Fold 3. So the black, all these black troops, you can find their service record, but the pension record is another thing. This is, as I mentioned over here, this is a pension index card. This is the one for Cesar. It tells you that he did have a pension, what the year when he got the pension, the application number, and the units. He was in 2 units because he was in that unit at 7th as a captain, and then after they took away his commission, he was with the heavy artillery. So even though you can find out about that there's a pension, then you have to go through the National Archives to be able to see what it says in there. The next guy is Sandy Brown. Now, he's USCC, so U.S. Colored Cavalry. He's one of the few, I think he's the only one I have that was in the cavalry from Louisiana, and this a veteran here. And again, here's his, and I have on here from places like his service record, about birth and death. I know that he died during that time period because if you look over here, his widow filed for a pension in '92. And if you look here, invalid, it's blank. When the veteran himself files, it's going to be here. So it looks like Sandy Brown never did file for himself. His widow filed, and then in 1904, I don't know if his widow was named Sarah. If she died, and so then the pension went to. They had to file another pension for a minor, so they had a child. It could go from. I've seen, and I'll show you one. There's sometimes a veteran files, then he dies. The widow, she couldn't keep on going on the same pension. She had to file, and then if she dies, and then one of the children that's a minor will file. And they all have 3 different. Now, luckily, on that one that I showed you, it was a veteran and a widow's. There have been some times, I think the one Reed got the same thing. Luckily the National Archives gave you 2 for 1, which is a good deal. They give you both of them for the $80 price. Okay. This one, Alan Carter, was in the, and some of these I was able to find out where they were organized. Most of them were organized here in Louisiana, but some of them were especially in the Midwest. This was organized in Iowa, and I mentioned, this one's interesting because the unit was organized in Iowa. Alan Carter was born in Virginia, but he enlisted in Missouri. So somehow all those three, he must have gotten from Virginia to Missouri, and then the unit that was in Iowa was doing some recruiting in Missouri. But I wasn't able to find out, but some of these I wasn't able to find out when they died. And this one's a interesting person. He was born in Natchitoches. He ended up, here's one where it shows 3 different cards for him. He's got one, it's kind of confusing, but they're all under his name. They called him Pollock, Pollock or Pollock. And they're all different. Luckily, they tell you the dates over here. It looks like he filed for one in 81, and then he filed again in 90, and then his widow, then he died. He died in 97, and then his widow filed one here, filed another one. So there's 4 different pensions for. And he's mentioned in the newspapers quite a bit, and also I see his name a lot in the deed records, because he was a court recorder. He recorded documents at the courthouse. I even found where my great-grandfather was, he was a commissioner, a federal commissioner in this area, and he okayed this document, and it showed that it was recorded by this guy right here. So he was, now on him, I don't mention a lot of the burial spots, because the majority of these I know they died here, a lot of them that they died here, but as far as where they're buried, there's the records showing that are it's hard to find. They weren't mentioned in the newspapers. They did have some death records at that time, and those you would think they were done by the city of Shreveport from 1875 to 1913. The city of Shreveport had birth and death records. Unfortunately, the city decided they couldn't take care of these records. They sent them down to the archives in Baton Rouge. And now I've tried to ask the archivist down there at the archives in Baton Rouge. I said, we really need at least a copy of those Shreveport records. They're not anywhere in town. You're the only place that has these certificates for Shreveport. And they refused. They said, no, we make money off of selling copies of these. And they wouldn't, we offered to pay them some money, whatever, because they already have them on microfilm, but they're just being obstinate. I might try again, maybe see if I can get some bigger clout to go after them. But so it's hard to find exactly where they're buried. I think most of these are buried in Star Cemetery. Star Cemeteries opened up in the early 1880s, and that was really one of the main cemeteries for African Americans. So So, but the records for Star Cemetery are almost non-existent. So it's hard to find out if they really are buried in Star. And this is one that had aliases. That had an alias. There's about a handful in here of people who were alias. They may have gone into the service under one name, but then they want to be known afterward with another name. So this is one that does have he does have a pension. That's one. Isabel Woods is the one that had the pension, and this one we know he is buried in Star Cemetery. There's his marker right there in Star, and this is his pension index card, and we do have his pension. You can see he was a cook and he was a Methodist minister, and he lived to be 93 years old. And I know I can't read it, but this is the first page of his pension application. And it gives a lot of information. There's one, let me see what it is. One of the questions that they ask is, were you a slave? And then it says, who was your last, if you were, who was your last owner? And so it has that and some of those questions that they ask on them. Pierre Dapion, I don't know where exactly in Louisiana he was born, but you can see he has a French-sounding name. And he was a corporal. The black soldiers could be sergeants or corporals, but not any higher. Also, barber. There's a good number of them who were barbers or carpenters. I don't know why, but they're, I guess because those can be sole proprietorships. They can be their own boss, and being a carpenter can go on different jobs, hire out to different companies, and barber can then just needs some barber equipment and a little shop. So you have several of them that are barbers and carpenters. Okay, Adam Hall, you can see he was a carpenter. Sometimes I get these occupations from the census, but on the service record, when they enlisted, it gave their occupation usually. And I think they did that. The Union Army was good about putting their occupation. Like my great-great-grandfather, who was in the Union Army, I mentioned he was a blacksmith. And here's another one who has an alias. The 48th U.S. Colored Infantry, there's at least a handful of them out of these that are in that 48th, and they were, and then some of the ones that were in like the 78th, 79th, 73rd, there's quite a number of those that were in the Shreveport area. And again, a carpenter. Now this Sandy Brown is not, I started off with the Sandy Brown, but his alias, he was another Sandy Brown. And he was a farm laborer. You can see a lot of them are dying. They died in the 1890s. didn't really seem to, of course, they were born around the 1840s, but they were, not too many of them lived past 1920. Now, we do have a pension application for him. Isabel Woods to provide. His is fairly thin. It's not one of these big ones like some of the other applications. And I don't know exactly on when, if he died that year or not. There is a guy buried in Star named Charles Holman, who it could be, but they have, the dates don't really match too well, so I don't know. And you see this one was organized in Michigan. So this right here is where the information, where I get a lot of the information according to the unit from this is part of the 1890 Veteran Schedule. Hampton Human, I've had trouble finding what unit he was in, because you see right here, he was in Company B and infantry, but this says, looks kind of like Tennessee. The only thing is, he would have been, during the war, he would have been in Texas, so maybe it's Texas, but I haven't found him as being in the index of black soldiers anywhere. But you can see he was a barber, but not only a barber, he was the coroner of Caddo Parish for several years. He was the coroner of Caddo Parish. He did inquest. He issued jury warrants. Like I say, he was raised in Galveston, and his name is in the between those that the one who's named Durant, Polick, they used his initials were E.W. Durant, and then this one, Hampton Human. They're in the newspapers quite a bit. Being one of them was the recorder for Caddo Parish, and then this one being the coroner. You could say, how can a barber be a coroner? There's no evidence that he had any medical training to be a coroner, but coroner was, at that time, it was elected position. You're elected to be coroner, and he was coroner for several years, and then I think later on, someone who ran against him beat him, but he was, but they say barbers, at least when you go pretty far back, barbers seem to know a lot about medical issues. And this one I wasn't able to find too much, Henry Johnson. Shelvor Johnson, we have his pension. It's another one that Isabel Woods provided. He was a steamboat worker, and he's buried in Zion Rest Cemetery. I'm not sure exactly where Zion Rest is, but he's one of the ones that we do. He does have a marker. This one took me a while to figure out because it almost looks like it's J-O-E, Jody, which I've never seen that name before. But it turns out it is Jordan. I don't know why it has a G on the end, but I couldn't find a pension for him, and he was a drayman. And he's in this 48th. So there were quite a number who ended up settling here that had been in 48. Hammock McClellan is one that when I first got interested in checking these black veterans, I purchased this pension myself, but at that time you could get a pension for $25. So it's gone all the way up from $25 to $80. And he was a carpenter. Now I didn't get his marker. I wanted to get his marker because he had this marker right here. And the inscription on this, I don't know if you can read it, it says, "I have fought a good fight, I must go, goodbye." That's what it says right up here. I've fought a good fight, I must go, goodbye. But I wanted to get his marker, but some of the other people took over and ended up, so you can see how this marker's fairly new looking, and they had a ceremony out there too. We had I think that was the funeral. One of my friends who plays the bagpipes, he's passed away, but he went out there burning love. But on Hammock, okay, here's so that's one of the pages of his pension, his first page. And his was a pretty thick one. One thing about Hammock is I found in the newspaper that it also found he was a teacher. And this was around the 1870s, 1880s. He was teaching up in Mooringsport, and there was somebody sent to check out the teachers, all the teachers in the public schools, and see how they were doing and check their competence. And he mentions he gave a report to the newspaper where he checked out Hammock McClellan, and he said one thing he said is he didn't seem to be doing too well, especially in subtraction. His subtraction wasn't very good. But it seemed like he was a carpenter, it seemed like he would know how to add and subtract pretty well, but he said he was kind of failed on subtraction. We have the pension for this Francis McKeel. He's the only one that was born up north. He was born free black up in New York. And his he was in this stands for United States Colored Heavy Artillery, which was organized in Rhode Island. He was up there, even though he was born in New York. I think they moved to New England, and he had a brother, Thomas McKeel, who also served, and he was a school teacher also. He came down here, but he stopped in Alabama, northern Alabama. He and his brother, and we have in his pension. It mentions that here's a copy of the first page of his pension. Is right, this one right here in 1892. But elsewhere in the pension, there's a lot of letters and things. He and his brother both were teachers at Tuskegee. They both taught at Tuskegee for a while. Now, Francis came down this way. His brother, though, stayed at Tuskegee at least for a while. And you can see usually you don't find too much about these black soldiers in the newspaper, but when he died, he was written up in 1912 as Francis McKeel. He was principal of, at that time they had 6 black schools. Well, before that, in say in the 1890s, early 1900s, they had 6 black schools, and they didn't give them names. At least at one time, they just called them school number 1, school number 2, school number 3. He taught at school number 6. Later on, I think school number 6 decided to go ahead and they called their school McKeel School, since he was the principal. And then, so now it doesn't mention in here about his Tuskegee thing, but he was he has a real thick. In fact, he's the one. This one here, I showed you. This is his pension, and it. And I think part of it's his pension, and then his widow. Samuel Morris, and like I say, a lot of these, I have their death dates, but as far as where they're, I don't know, I'm not sure if on the death certificates that they have down in Baton Rouge, if it mentions burial spot. You've seen one, does it mention burial?
If you plugged it in there, I don't think it says he was, I'd love to know where Presley Robinson was buried.
They didn't start putting, some of these ones that the city of Shreveport did, they didn't put burial spots. I think at least by 1914, when the state took over birth and death records, then they started putting burial place. But I just have a feeling that the majority of these are buried in Star Cemetery. And let's see, there's Frank Newman. His unit was 12th U.S. Colored Heavy Artillery, organized in Kentucky. And he was born in Kentucky. Isaac Nunn, another 48th, in the 48th Regiment, and he was a corporal. I tried to find his death record. It does mention on his 1890 veteran schedule that he had a rupture, as far as his condition, which I'm not sure what that meant back then, a rupture. I'm wondering if it could have been like a hernia, that he had a hernia. Not too much known about him, but he was one that had an alias. And he made it to 1928. Another Robinson, also in the 48th. This veteran here is the one that Reed can tell you about. He's the one who purchased the pension for him, and he has a whole talk about Presley Robinson, who had an alias Presley Fondon. His pension's a pretty thick one too, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
He was a carpenter, another carpenter, and was born in Clarksville, Tennessee. That's a picture of a photo of a copy of a page from his service record. Like I said, you can get to all the service records in fact, you can get all the service records for the black Union soldiers, But the white Union soldiers, you have to go through National Archives. They haven't put those online. There's his pension index card. So he first got one by himself as an invalid, and then in 1899 when he died, his widow Emma got one. And here's a Shreveport's death certificate. I haven't seen many of these. Like I said, we should have them. Should have them up here in Shreveport instead of down there in back. At least copies of them. But they're charging, was it $5 a piece for people to get copies of them. And it does say, I don't.
They just spelled his name, Roberson.
Oh, yeah.
But it's clearly the same guy.
And I don't see a blank. I don't see a blank on there
No, there's not a place for the cemetery.
for a burial or cemetery.
I would love to know what Professor Robinson was doing. Seems like there's generations of black people who there's no graves for them. But if we had burial grounds for them, I don't know what happened to them.
At one time in Star Cemetery, Gary Joyner, the local historian, he rented out. He doesn't have his own ground penetrating radar machine. He probably would like to, but they're probably pretty expensive. But he took the ground penetrating radar machine out to Star Cemetery, tried to determine exactly how many people were buried there in Star, because you can see a lot of places where you don't see any markers at all, but most of those places they are burials. But he could use the ground penetrating radar to see, maybe find out, get an idea of where there are burials, what places are where there's no one buried. He was out there, and someone, and I don't know the whole story, but someone said, "No, you can't do it. We don't want you to do that." They stopped him.
They went through the horrible period where the white caretakers of Star Cemetery decided it would be a good thing to remove a lot of the markers and break them up. And there was a whole heap of broken stones out in the middle of the cemetery. So who knows what these people were thinking. But Isabel Woods was the one who reclaimed a lot of those stones and rebuilt a lot of them. Just put them back together from the pieces.
So like I said, there's thousands of people buried there in Star, but if you compare that to how many markers there really are, it's a kind of small percentage. And the records there never were, I don't think, very good records kept. This is George Sherman. This is his marker, and that's out at Star. That's one that's out at Star. And he was a farmer. This regiment was formed in Tennessee. And here's another one that was also formed in Tennessee. And William was a barber. He lived here for a while in Shreveport, then he ended up going to Kansas. He died in Kansas. But I'm not sure where he's buried. And here's I couldn't find a pension for him, but there's a couple of soldiers from that 138th Infantry USCI that was organized in Georgia. So whenever it's good that these, even though you don't have the whole pension, at least you can tell when you see these index cards that the veteran themselves did not get a pension. It wasn't until after he died that his widow filed for one. And it gives the date over here. So you know the veteran died before that date. There's another one. So I was able to find there is an index to the people who died in Shreveport before 1914, if they lived in the city limits. But it doesn't give you much information. It doesn't give you like what's on the death certificate that they have in Baton Rouge. And Reverend John B. Webb, he's buried at Star also. So, minister of the gospel. Here's we have his pension. We just got his one that Isabel Woods, and his is pretty thick one. This is one of the pages. John Webb, I don't know some of his pension applications got rejected, so he just kept on. Every so often, every few years, he did another one. It got rejected. Finally, he had one that was accepted. I'm not sure what the problem was. And here's another carpenter. And here's the last one. He was born in Vermilion Parish. And so you can see quite a bit, out of these 28, well, really about 30, out of these 30, over 20 of them have pensions, but we'll gradually get them because they have a lot of good information. You get some information from the service record, but there's a lot more in, like we wouldn't have known about from Francis McKeel that he had any connection with Tuskegee. That he taught there, except it was in his pension. And on one of it's interesting, somebody was writing a letter to Tuskegee. They wanted to find out about Thomas McKeel, Francis's brother, where he was. They wanted to add, it was the board, the pension board. And they got a letter back that came from Tuskegee, and it showed the president of Tuskegee was Booker T. Washington at that time. But they did give some, there were three medals that some of the black veterans could get. You had this one right here, the Army of the James Medal. That was especially made by General Benjamin Butler. He made it it was going to be only for black soldiers for bravery. And I don't know, I don't know the number of these medals that were given out. But he really was the one who wanted to have as many black troops as possible, and also give them commissions and have them be officers. Butler, but General Nathaniel Banks had a different idea. And then over here, this is the Medal of Honor. These are two different Medal of Honor. These are the Medal of Honors that would have been around the time of the Civil War, which you still have Medal of Honors going. They have changed some. This one here is for the Army, and this one is for the Navy. You can see there's barrels, cannon barrels here, and the This one over here has an anchor, and it's kind of like twisted. It has a rope going around the anchor. The Navy Medal of Honor is now different. It does. You don't see this twisting rope around there. It just comes down just like regular anchor. So I think 1913 is when they changed it from what it looks like there. I couldn't find a photo exactly of one that looks like that. So those might be pretty rare. Down here, this is how many Medal of Honor were giving. There were 18 of them given to black soldiers, and there were 8 of them given to black sailors. So 26 altogether. And a lot of those that were given to the Army, there's 18, there were, I don't know how many, but there was
Wasn't 14?
I think a lot of them were in one specific battle that happened near the end of the Civil War. So anyway, I think there's still more to find out about some of these men, but I think that's all I can find at this time.
Did you talk about the casualty rate? I missed the first part.
Yeah, the casualty rate was about 20% for the.
I didn't know that until this day. That's amazing. That's higher than the white casualty rate, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 33% higher. 33% higher than the white.
I'd always heard that the black troops weren't sent to the front and weren't engaging in battles. I got corrected. It's totally different from what I experienced in my lifetime. Just what Joe showed me in his research.
Yeah, they had that.
These guys were real soldiers.
They might not have been in a lot of different battles, but when they were, like the assault on Fort Wagner, lost a lot of men. There were, as I mentioned, there were 40,000 soldiers and sailors who died throughout the whole Civil War. And I think there's, like I said, there's these pensions. Some of the things where they get into, especially the medical details of the veterans, might not be quite as interesting. But what they had to do is on these pensions. Sometimes a veteran says he puts down in his pension that he's applying for as an invalid. And so the doctors have to see, if he really does have medical problems, and if he should get a pension. And then you do have some good affidavits in some of them where they talk about some of it is where a fellow soldier in the same unit is saying whether he witnessed someone getting shot, this one who's the applicant, did he witness him getting hurt or something, getting shot? So they have affidavits like that.